New York City's subway system is one of the busiest in the world. Every day, millions of commuters, like you, rely on the MTA to get around the city. But with the steady rise of fare prices, fare jumping has become more of an issue than ever before. We're going to take a deep dive on that subject today, as Studio 103 starts right now. Welcome to episode 5 of Studio 103. I'm your host, Jaden Gonzalez. You see it every day, people getting right on the bus without paying or jumping the turnstile in the subway. So what's being done to stop it? Today, we're diving into New York City's fare evasion epidemic, and student producer Abbygael Morrison sat down with Ray Raimundi from the MTA to learn more.
Thanks a lot. We're here with Ray Raimundi from the MTA, and we're going to be talking about fare evasion.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. Great to be here back at Harry S. Truman High School, and appreciate the honor of being a guest here on this podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, so to start, first of all, fare evasion is like the culture of New Yorkers. It's like custom to always jump over stiles and, just walk past the bus driver. My question is, what is the expectation of riders when they decide to take the bus or the subway?
Yeah, fare compliance is the utmost expectation. One of the unique assets of our transportation system is the fact that we have a shared space, right? And all New Yorkers share that space. And there's an honor code that comes with that, right? Everyone is expected to pay the fare. Unfortunately, there's been a couple of factors that led to this culture, as you so eloquently put it, in terms of fare evasion and people normalizing the fare evasion. What happened during COVID, it was a big detriment to the MTA, right? We had to shut down a system for several months. And then when people started coming back, and particularly the first responders, there was a period of time where we weren't asking customers to pay the fare, right? And that was to support the first responders responding during the pandemic. And then as well, on terms of the buses, we wanted to make sure that there was social distancing created. Pandemic, thank goodness, has been over. Ridership has come back. Unfortunately, though, there has been confusion about people thinking, why should I pay the fare? But it's absolutely wrong. Paying the fare is key for the MTA's operating budget. That operating budget includes paying the bills of keeping all of our headquarters, all of our supplemental offices, the service running. In addition to the fact the operating budget is key because it pays the more than 70,000 employees that we have in the MTA. Many of them may be related to you or your viewers. Many of them may be fathers and mothers who have children who come right here to this school. So what are we doing to change that? There have been so many initiatives that we've done to enforce fare compliance, right? The chairman has been outspoken about that in all of his public events and during our public board meetings. The New York City Transit president as well has also developed and asked our innovation team to create measures to help prevent fare evasion. Let's start first with the subway. The subways, and I'm sure you saw it in the media, there are certain stations that we have where they've added fins. And those fins are hopefully to prevent people from hopping over the fare array or the turnstile. We've also conducted an initiative where we had our innovation team at the MTA provide a mechanism to stop backcocking, right? Backcocking is that way where you see people turn the turnstile in a certain way so they could slide and then go through. On the buses, fare evasion is really key because at one point last year, it was upwards of 48%, right? 1 in 2 people were not paying their bus fare. So I'm sure you saw, and for people who are able to take the bus, we put it on our digital screen and messaging, fare enforcement, and we've also added Eagle team members. Those are members of our Department of Security within New York City Transit. And what their goal is to be at stations, I should say bus stops, particularly bus stops, what we call the SBS bus stops, as well, to ensure that people pay the fare, right? They're checking their tickets, and as we adopt more and go more into modernizing the system, and soon everyone will be using Omni, right? The Metro card is going to be phased out by the end of this year and going into early 2026. That will be another mechanism of way for these Eagle team members to ensure that people pay the fare. The reality is we need to change the culture. We've lost a lot of money. And the message too here is that people need to pay the fare. You know, when you look at the MTA overall, we have the best deal in terms of transportation and public transit than any other transportation authority in the country, including San Francisco, Houston. I mean, you could pay $2.90 and you could get from Co-op City all the way to Far Rockaway and only pay one fee. When people fare evade, and that includes all types of people, what happens is it affects the people who are most economic and disadvantagedly challenged. Because what happens is the more fare evasion that happens, the more we have to reduce service. Right. We could have to get to draconian cuts too in terms of doing layoffs to make up the budget for the MTA. So the chairman has announced new initiatives, even coming within the next couple of weeks, to ensure that there's more of a no tolerance policy. NYPD and the transit district as well is doing the key elements as well to being present at the fare gates, at the turnstiles, on our buses as well, to ensure that we could reduce the amount of people who are not complying with paying the fare.
Right. So my next question would be, why don't the bus drivers enforce fare payment?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. It's a delicate balance, and it's also something that has to be negotiated through collective bargaining agreement. And what's CBA? That's essentially negotiations that happen between MTA leadership and the unions that are representing our bus operators, right? Which is the Transit Workers Union, TWU. Here's the reality of it. The MTA has put out an initiative to provide more resources necessary to get the bus operators to enforce the fare. But the reality as well is customers and the public have been committing more violent acts against bus operators. That number has unfortunately increased, and it's a frustrating thing because no one who's doing their job, especially the people who are responsible for moving New York City, should ever have to be attacked for something that is the law, right? And people are supposed to comply to. So, we have, or the MTA has created mechanisms, including the driver cab for protections of bus operators, because the number of assaults and attacks against them, especially those who enforce fare compliance, has increased. And despite there being a strict law that you attack a bus driver, a bus operator I should say, or a train conductor and an MTA employee, there are fines that are punishable up to 7 years. The reality is our current criminal justice system doesn't abide by that. Many of the people who commit these unfortunate acts against our transit workers, because of the way the criminal justice laws are now, which the state legislator needs to be responsible for, these people are committing crimes, committing serious felonies, and those felonies are being brought down by judges here in our city, as felony misdemeanors, which is allowing them to be released from lockup once they're caught. Sometimes the same day where they commit the act. So we have started an initiative to ensure that we are protecting our bus operators, our transit workers from these attacks. Within the last 6 months, we hired what we call a criminal justice advocate. Her name is Katie Falaska, and Katie Falaska's sole responsibility is to specifically work with district attorneys in each of the 5 boroughs to ensure that a prosecutorial conduct and the charges that are filed against these people who unfortunately commit these crimes, that they are being prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and that they are following up with the family members and the transit workers as well to mitigate this process of these bus operators and transit workers from being attacked. That's going to help to change the culture and for them to feel more comfortable with doing more fair compliance with customers who come on to the buses and trains.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, fair evasion has been happening for like many years. Mm-hmm. Why now is the MTA deciding to really reinforce paying the fare?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons. You know, there's always been fare evasion. It hasn't been as prevalent as it has post-COVID. You know, you could see on our metrics page, metrics.mta.info, to see the trend of how fare evasion works, and you'll clearly see from 2020 going up, even up until last year, there's been an upward trajectory trend that's scoring up. I think that goes to the fact of what I mentioned earlier about confusion post-COVID, and also as well there were times where the MTA was forced by the state legislator to adopt other principles that helped to cause this confusion of fare evasion. Right, just last September we finished what was enacted by us and asked by us by the state legislator to have a free bus pilot program, right? That's when we chose one bus route in every borough that had, you know, it was free bus fare. And this was an idea by the state legislator in hopes of attracting people back to the system and to use the bus post-COVID. The problem with that was it again caused confusion amongst riders about, you know, well, do I pay the fare here? Do I don't pay the fare here? And we need to bring people back to the center. Right. The only way in which the transit system could operate at its maximum level and to provide the transportation to people all across our city, in particular people who are in transit deserts, right, where they have to be able to, they're in 2 fare zones like Co-op City in order for them to get into the city center or other parts. And also as well to support our capital program as well, right? We're trying to increase ways where people could have easier and faster commutes. That includes a new project which is called Penn Access, right? That's going to bring Metro North service here to Co-op City and make residents here in Co-op City to be able to get into city center within 25 minutes compared to the average trip from this location taking sometimes an hour, hour 15, hour 20 minutes to get to places in Midtown. We're trying to stop that. We need the funds to be able to do that, and that comes through our fare box. So, you know, those are some of the initiatives in hopes of changing that culture and ending the confusion of people believing that they don't have to pay. I'll tell you one thing as well that I think is important as well. We've also changed the culture when it comes to students like you, right? This September, you guys came to school. What did you get? You got a new Omni card, right? That Omni card is important because now it gives all students, right, no matter their proximity to where they live or to the school, to have 4 trips, right, per day, and for them to be able to use 7 days a week compared to just the 5 days. That was a big initiative in hopes of providing the access and resources for students to be able to know if they have work jobs, if they have after-school programs that they could easily go to do that, and there's not this separatism of everyone having different ways. Oh, I only have access to the bus, I don't have access to the train, so on and so forth. And that's supposed to help in terms of reducing the amount of fare evasion even amongst the students, and to know that the MTA is relying upon the Department of Education and the schools to keep students accountable of how they move around the transportation system.
So that brings me to my next question. Would you say that was giving the students Omni cards?
Yeah.
Would you say that was the first step towards combating against fare evasion?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say it's the first step, but it was one of the steps that were made in terms of initiatives to help reduce fare evasion. Back in 2022, the chairman of the MTA, Jano Lieber, compiled a consortium of individuals to talk about how do we reduce fare evasion. This group of 7 individuals spent 19 months going around the city and really looking into this problem. It was called the Blue Ribbon Panel. And this Blue Ribbon Panel essentially came up with recommendations to the chairman and to the state legislator about how we curb fare evasion, right? We don't want to make fare evasion a criminal justice problem, right? Which some people may argue targets black and brown communities, right? So we want to be sensitive to the fact that if there's people who can't afford the fare, what are we doing to accommodate them? What I think people don't realize as well, and I hope people who are watching this get to know, the MTA does consistent outreach to understand the needs of individuals, especially those who are socially economically disadvantaged or who say, oh my gosh, even $2.90 the fare is unaffordable. There's an initiative not done by the MTA, but it's actually pushed forward and funded by the city of New York. You know what it's called? It's called Fair Fares. Fair Fares allows residents of New York City, even if you make $65,000 a year, to be able to get reduced or half fare for paying. So instead of you paying $2.90, you only pay $1.75. Right now, that program is meant to supplement the fare for some 500,000 New Yorkers. You want to take a guess at how many people have signed up? Only 300,000. There's still a swath of New York that could be able to simply, on their phones, on the internet, or could go to any of our customer service centers throughout the system that could sign up for the Fair Fares. It's an easy process done through the Department of Social Services in collaboration with the MTA to know if they can't afford the current fare that it's in, they could be able to have reduced or even half fare. And those are other methods that were part of this Blue Ribbon Panel to understand fare enforcement, fare compliance, and to reduce the culture of people fare evading.
I'm going to derail a little bit.
No, look at
the
that term.
NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch
Yes.
in the press conference mentioned
Yes.
about the significant decline in fare evasion and how these steps towards pushing against it have really worked. About 25% decrease in fare evasion.
Correct.
So, and she also mentioned how everyone should be able to ride the subway without fear of violence or chaos.
Correct.
My question is, do you think fare evaders are also related to the crime in the subways?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and the answer is yes. Our statistics that we've compiled, and also the statistics by the NYPD Transit Bureau, right? They're the law enforcement agency responsible for patrolling the buses and subways, show that most people who are evading the fare are also connected to serious crimes that happen within the system and also outside of the system, what we call internally topside, right, on street level. That's why the NYPD, and thanks to Commissioner Tisch and for Mayor Adams as well, have really adopted pushing more cops into the system, having more cops there present at the fare array and the turnstiles, because the reality is most people who are fare evading, those that are doing it, are also committing other acts of crime within the system. And that has been key. NYPD statistics will show you that the number of arrests for fare evasion has increased significantly. I think that number is around 30%. I could get you a more exact number. But as well, of those numbers, a lot of the stops for fare evasion, those people have been found of having weapons on them. Though cops have determined that the people who are fare evading as well have open warrants for other crimes that they've committed. So, this is all part of the public safety initiative, and the MTA really thanks Governor Hochul for her funding and her commitment to it, along with Mayor Adams as well, with supplying the cops necessary to keep that, and more importantly, to have people feel like they're safe, right? Numbers are numbers at the end of the day, and while you'll hear a lot of officials say, "Hey, listen, the average amount of serious crimes, right, felonies, assaults, in the most unfortunate cases, murders that happen, there are about 6 significant crimes that happen on the subway every day at average, sometimes low, sometimes less." Now, when you think about that number compared to the 4.5 million people that ride the subway each day, and the 1.3 million people that ride the buses that day, that's not a huge number. However, every serious crime that happens to someone is one too many. But the important part is that people feel safe. And that's why the governor and the mayor have pushed forward those initiatives to having more NYPD presence within the system. The governor just announced last month that she's putting funding in place to increase the amount of NYPD Transit Bureau officers up to 700. So she's adding 200 additional more, and she's also adding more cops to actually ride on the trains during the overnight hours between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. So, the goal here is for people to feel safe. If people don't feel safe, they don't ride the system, and then New York doesn't move. Those have consequential economic challenges for the city and for the system as a whole.
Right. So, what exactly are officers told to do in an event that someone just refuses to pay the fare?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the NYPD and what their practices are, but I know the chairman has made public about what he is hoping NYPD does in terms of enforcing the fare and to stop fare evasion. I could tell you the initiatives that we've done just on the MTA side. With the help of the governor and funding, we have hired hundreds of unarmed security guards. You'll see those security guards from the company Allied. They are part of the local 32 BJ union, and you'll see those security guards at emergency gates around the subway system. Their job is to ensure that there is fare compliance and that people know the emergency exit gate is not a place for you to use to get out of the subway, right? It's only used there for emergency or people who have disabilities, who are or families, members with strollers, or people who are in wheelchairs to use to go out. And I think that's helped twofold. It's helped to decrease the amount of fare evasion. As you probably are aware, the governor announced last month down 26% over the last 6 months on the subway, and down 13% on the buses. Listen, the reality is there's still a big problem with the buses. Fare evasion is a little bit more easier to commit on buses because there's not a full force structure that's there to help prevent people from boarding in the back door or from walking past the bus operator. But with the increase in the number of Eagle team members to provide that security, with the transition of Omni as well, and to know that there are initiatives that the New York City Transit president also put in place for bus operators not to, when they get to stops, have the doors wide open unless there are people back there that are actually pressing the tape, right? So let's say you get to a stop right here on Co-op City or Baychester and Bartow Avenue, and it's a major stop. You know, if people are not pressing the tape to exit from the back door, then the door is not going to automatically open. Or there's a nodule that the bus operators have where they could go half open and they could go fully open, which essentially means if one person puts the tape, the back doors will open and then they'll close immediately, rather than cranking to the full access where the doors open and it takes a longer time for the doors to close. All those steps are necessary in terms of making sure that people comply with the fare. And the reality is most people do, but we don't want the people who do pay to see other people who are not paying and then to feel like suckers. And that's about changing the culture, which we're actively working on.
Right, so I kind of already have an idea, but where do you stand on the stricter policies on fare evasion?
Listen, New York is a community. The transit system is a community. And the reality is we want to make sure we keep people moving as fast as possible. We want to make sure we keep up reliable service. We want to make sure we continue to be one of the best and biggest employers in the state of paying good paying jobs and offering the benefits to our workforce, which is a big part of this New York City community. And we also want to make sure that our transit workers, right, our bus operators, our train operators, our train conductors are protected as well. I think there are plenty of resources that are out there that will help to assist people who say that they can't pay the $2.90. But the reality is New Yorkers all work together. We need to make sure that there is fare compliance. It's only going to help to benefit the transit system, but more importantly, benefit the commuters to enjoy a transit system that's reliable, that's safe, and that's faster and more convenient.
So, we're running out of time a little bit. What do you have to say to students that refuse to use their Omni cards?
Yeah, you know, listen, the Omni card is there for use. The fact that those initiatives were put in place over the summer and for the start of this 2024-2025 school year is huge. I could tell you when I was a high school student here at Truman High School, there wasn't even the Metro card was even created yet, so that's taken it back. You got a bus pass based upon your proximity of where you lived and whether or not you were close to a train or a bus. Now, students don't even have to worry about that. And the fact that they could be able to use it 7 days a week is such a game changer like no other. Take advantage of that, because the less that there is use of it, the more that the program cuts, and that's what students need to understand. The MTA has to supplement almost $400 million annually to pay for the student Omni cards that you currently have. That's a program that's very expensive, and the city only pays a third of it. You know, so a lot of that money is coming from the MTA to be able to give students a free way to use a transportation system that's a $1 trillion asset. So I encourage and implore students, use the Omni card, because the less use that there is of it, the more cuts that will come because of that would be draconian. Especially for students who live farther away from schools and don't have the means to pay the fare every day in order to get to school.
Right. So that's all the time we have for right now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure for me to be here.
And we'll go back.
That's all the time we have for today's episode. Thank you for joining us. Remember, we here at Studio 103 want you to be part of the podcast. If you have an idea for a segment, stop by Studio 103 on the first floor, or scan the QR code on your screen. I'm Jade Gonzalez. We'll see you here next time.